Welcome to Weekly Digest, where we highlight the work of ministers of government as they push the administration's development agenda. Picking up from where we left off last week, Minister of Agriculture Zulfikar Mustafa has pledged to provide flood-affected communities of Metamerzorg Railway View and Zilot North on the west coast of Demerara with water pumps in a bid to reduce floodwater levels.
What we have done from the NDIA level, we'll be sending over here 2 pumps. One will be placed permanently at the detention sluice, and the other one will be placed at Zilot temporarily until the water recedes. Come back myself with our engineer in the area to see what intervention we can make so that we can avoid future flooding. As a matter of fact, these areas are very low areas, and we find that water from the highlands always accumulated in these low-lying areas.
Minister Mustafa confirmed that after the water recedes, government will be offering more support to the flood-affected residents. The Human Organ and Tissue Transplant Bill will open the pathway for Ghana to improve its health services and boost the fight against diseases, including COVID-19. The bill was piloted in the National Assembly by Minister of Health, Dr. Frank Anthony.
Our legislation did not contemplate this type of medical procedure, and so what we're doing is putting the legal framework in place to allow us to do this safely and put in all the safeguards, put in a lot of the best practices that are obtained around the world as it relates to harvesting organs and, of course, making sure that we have a proper scrutinized list for donors. Transplant, especially kidney transplant, has been shown to be very effective in terms of assisting patients because they're no longer required to come every, 3 times a week to be able to get dialysis. Plus there's a lot of cost when you're doing dialysis. All of this can be removed if you get a transplant, and a person can also return to almost normal work life.
Dr. Anthony also explained to the House that the Act will aid in the fight against COVID-19 as the synthetically made antibodies can now be transferred into persons. The PPPC government tabled 2 critical pieces of legislation, the Local Content Bill and the Natural Resources Fund NRF Amendment Bill, in the 34th sitting of the National Assembly on Wednesday. The highly anticipated legislations seek to foster transparent and accountable management of the emerging oil and gas sector. The historic Local Content Bill paves the way for maximum employment of Guyanese in the oil and gas sector. It lays out 40 different services that the oil and gas companies and their subcontractors must procure from Guyanese companies by the end of 2022. The Natural Resources Minister explained that as the capacity of Guyanese expands, so will the services in the local content legislation.
Is so clear and so simple that every single Guyanese can understand what is in it. Every single Guyanese will know that there is nothing hidden in this bill. It is as clear as day, and it is simple to understand. We will create what we call the Local Content Secretariat at the Ministry of Natural Resources. That is the body that will monitor local content, that will do enforcement, and that is the company that will do, that is the agency that will do the assessment also.
Senior Minister in the Office of the President with responsibility for finance, Dr. Ashni Singh, said the bill needed to be passed as quickly as possible so that Guyanese could no longer miss out on the opportunities they should have had before the first oil in 2019. This was in response to accusations from the opposition MPs that the government wanted to rush the bill through the House. With the passing of the Local Content Bill, Guyanese and Guyanese businesses stand to benefit from US $400 million to US $500 million annually in terms of revenue. On the Natural Resource Fund Amendment Bill, this was met with failed attempts by the opposition MPs to block the passage of the legislation that is meant to significantly improve the management of Ghana's oil revenue to ensure greater transparency and accountability.
Mr. Speaker, instead of respecting the consequences of the no confidence motion, the then APNU AFC a party that is currently engaging in thuggish behavior, unprecedented thuggish behavior in the National Assembly, stayed on in Parliament, refused to respect the Constitution of Guyana, and forced through the Parliament a natural resources bill that in fact embodied tremendous vulgarity.
Dr. Singh explained that it was necessary to replace the previous act because it had set the stage for abuse by the former APNU-AFC government.
These features in the APNU-AFC Natural Resource Fund Act were not by accident. They represented another piece in the puzzle, the GCOM puzzle, the taxation of people to death, the political persecution of political opponents, the unlawful and unconstitutional behavior, the ramming down the throats of the Parliament and the people of Guyana, a Natural Resource Fund Act, the pervasive powers of their minister. This NRF Act of 2019 was just another piece in the APNU-AFC dictatorial design and intention.
The new act includes a new governance mechanism in the form of a board of directors, reducing the extensive powers of the finance minister. It also sets out transparent rules for the withdrawal of funds and cuts down cumbersome provisions allowing for efficient management and oversight of the fund. Works on the construction of the $51 million multi-purpose facility in Section C Sophia, Georgetown, is moving apace. The project forms part of the Adequate Housing and Urban Accessibility Program being executed by the Central Housing and Planning Authority.
The fencing is in progress. Then you have the ground, but there is a delay in terms of the actual ground itself because materials are there, but you realize with the rainfall to be able to do some work there. But the actual pavilion and for the center itself, that is nearing completion. But so overall, we can say it's about 55% complete. We've physically they've expended about $26 million so far.
Once completed, the multi-purpose facility will be equipped with an open-view deck and bleachers with a wheelchair access ramp. It will also have a basketball court along with solar floor lights and walkway lighting and a play area with a swing, seesaw, slide and round climber. Several existing recreational facilities in the area will also be upgraded under the project. In anticipation of New Year's festivities and gatherings, citizens are being reminded that these activities will be closely monitored by the members of the joint services. Minister of Health, Dr. Frank Anthony, noted this during Thursday's COVID-19 update. The minister said government is adamant on ensuring that all COVID-19 protocols, particularly those governing businesses and entertainment, are in place and being followed.
You will see more patrols, more joint services patrols, and we want people to be safe.
Minister Anthony said flouting of these protocols can result in a massive increase in cases.
What we don't want is after these holidays that we start seeing an increase, a big spike in cases. If we do have that, then depending on how many cases, it can quickly overwhelm our system.
Further, the minister encouraged persons to continue using their face mask and, if possible, to use surgical and N95 masks for better protection against the virus.
My advice to people is that if you believe you're at a higher risk of COVID-19 in the environment in which you find yourself, then you should wear that N95 mask or procedural surgical mask. If you are at a lower risk, then you can probably wear the cloth mask. But again, the cloth mask is not as effective because the pores in the mask are quite big, relatively big, and therefore viral particles can pass through if you're in close proximity with somebody who is infected.
Government has responded to claims that there are no penalties for the misuse of oil monies. At a media conference on Thursday, Several ministers of government, led by Minister of Parliamentary Affairs and Governance Gail Teixeira, and Senior Minister in the Office of the President with responsibility for finance, Dr. Ashley Singh, addressed the media. Minister Teixeira led by condemning the actions of the opposition in the Parliament.
Should be ashamed of, and we are ashamed of, that the parliamentary opposition would defile the sanctity of the National Assembly as an institution and the highest lawmaking forum of Guyana. We mustn't take lightly what happened with the mace. We all, as MPs, we see the mace, we walked in formally every time we have a sitting, and it's put there, and then we have to stand up, and we close the sitting, and the guy lifts it up and walks out with it. And many people think it's ceremonial. It is part of ceremony, but the mace is the authority of the legislature. It is a symbol of the authority of the National Assembly. Any attempt to remove it is therefore an attempt to undermine, to overthrow the authority of the National Assembly.
Any misuse of any monies drawn down from the consolidated fund is subject to the penalties that are covered under the Fiscal Management and Accountability Act. These are public monies. They form part of the public finances, and all public finances are also subject to the Fiscal Management and Accountability Act. And that Fiscal Management and Accountability Act has detailed provisions regarding misappropriation of public funds, and it assigns penalties to misappropriation of public funds. So it is absolutely inaccurate and false to say that there are no provisions to govern penalties for misappropriation.
It adds an additional layer of that board of directors. And when the APNU-AFC says to people that we have removed our oversight committee, that is false. If you go on their page right now, they have said that there is a 5-man committee. Our committee, we have a board of directors, and then we have an oversight committee, which is a 9-man oversight committee. All from civil society that are being represented there. So you have an additional layer of protection.
That's it for this edition of Weekly Digest. For these and other government-related information, do log on to our website, dpi.gov.gy, and their social media platforms as well. Goodbye.